Hey you guys, it's Patty from Creative Eclectic, and it's been a little while since I posted, and I want to apologize about that. I had some technical difficulties and some problems with my camera, and just basically decided to scrap all the videos that I had filmed, which was maybe 4 or 5, because I was having problems with them, like I said. So I'm just starting over and a little bit different than what I had originally planned to do. So anyway, I have a stack of books here, and these are all the things I read in May. And rather than do individual reviews on each one of them or select ones in the stack, I decided to just do kind of a end of May wrap up of what I read in May. So I'm going to go in timeline order of when I read things and what they were and what I thought of them. So the first thing I read in May was this book by Dean Koontz, Innocence. And I picked it as kind of, I guess, really a palate cleanser. Oops, sorry, I hit my microphone. I hope that didn't mess it up too much. It was just something that was on my shelf with all the other Dean Koontz books, which I've rearranged my shelves. I don't know where they are. I think they're way up high above me. I don't have very many Dean Koontz books, but I found some at Goodwill for like $2, and I was like, oh, I kind of like Dean Koontz. I'll pick these up, little short novels, and so I decided to read this one, and it kind of reads like a kind of a modern take on Beauty and the Beast, where there's this guy that has to hide away from the rest of the world because everyone he comes in contact just reacts to him in horror. So he, even his own mother and the midwife that helped birth him into the world, everyone he runs across just reacts violently almost to him. So he is careful to only come out at night. He lives kind of in this underground dwelling kind of underneath the city. They never talk about what city he's in, but I kind of feel like it might be New York. And so he meets this girl that on one of his nighttime expeditions, he goes into, I guess it's a library that he has found access to. And he's never run into anybody before, but when he's in this library, he runs into this girl who's, pretty close in age to him. I think she's maybe 18, 19, 20, early 20s, something like that. And he's in his 20s. And so a few years older than she is, but not, not weirdly so for him to find her attractive or whatever. And so he meets this beautiful girl, and the kind of the head proprietor of this library turns out to be not such a nice guy, and he's in the library too, and he's chasing her through the library with intent to do her harm. And so thus starts a friendship between these two, and between the young man who's hiding away because he figures he's so disfigured and horrible to look at and some kind of monster, and she's this beauty. So it reads like a Beauty and the Beast story, but it turns out to be much more than that. I was really surprised at the direction that this book took, and I don't want to spoil it. That's just kind of an overview for you, but it goes this direction that I didn't expect, and it's really a beautiful story. And I thought the writing was beautiful too. Some really nice things in here, and I'm so glad I read it. By the end of it, I was just kind of like, oh, I love this book. So that was, and I was surprised by that. I didn't think I loved it until I started getting towards the end. I was like, wait a minute, what's going on here, really? And then I don't know, I really liked it. If you find this somewhere in your library or are interested enough to purchase it, I think it would be well worth a read if you want something that's kind of uplifting and eventful. There's a lot. It's kind of fast paced too. So anyway, first book I read, Innocence by Dean Koontz. Um, the next book I read, I wanted sci-fi at that point. So I had this on my shelf also, Roadside Picnic by Arkady and Boris Strugatsky. And this book really intrigued me. Another YouTuber put it on kind of one of his top 10 all-time sci-fi books. And he's a YouTuber that focuses only on sci-fi books. That's his thing. So I was like, well, okay. And it sounded good. It's it was written in 1972, I believe, or first published in 1972. So it's a little, it's almost 50 years old, but it it was written by, a couple of Russian brothers, during the time. It's definitely, it's kind of in the middle of that Cold War, pre the Berlin Wall falling and all of that. So very much, Russia was very much closed off to the West. So trying to think of a good way to describe this book without giving away spoilers. I hate spoilers when I'm wanting to read a book and someone's like, oh, there are no spoilers, and then it's full of spoilers. So I'm not going to go really any further than the information that's on the back of the book. So what happens is aliens come to Earth, but they don't stay long. They just stay for a day or two and then they're gone. There's like no contact, no communication. They just kind of stop. They just kind of stop here and at various points around the globe. And after they leave, there's all this debris within these zones where they had stopped. And the zones are really toxic. You can't really go in there. You can't live there anymore if you live there. There's just weird stuff there. And so this institute is set up on the kind of the outskirts of one of these zones. And this is supposed to be set somewhere in North America, but they don't really talk about if it's the United States or if it's Canada. But it's supposed to be somewhere in North America. Because it's written in the time that like I was describing it in Russia, it reads very much like Russia instead of North America. There's kind of this oppressive feeling, kind of a almost like you feel like you're being watched. You get that sense from the characters that there's not kind of this freedom that we're used to having in North America. The police are always stopping people and, kind of doing checkpoints. But the main character, his name is Red Shoehart, and he is what's called a stalker. And it's not stalker in the sense that we think of a stalker, someone following somebody around and casing their every move. This is a term that these brothers, these authors have come up with. They like the sound of the word, apparently. But a stalker in this book is more like a prospector. and he goes into this zone, sneaks in there, and retrieves artifacts and then sells them on the black market. And the artifacts are really weird, like I was saying. There would be like perpetual batteries that can power a car forever, um, and just these weird things. But and kind of the holy grail that everyone is looking for, that one of the stalkers claims to have seen and has a map for, is there's supposed to be this gold sphere that will give you whatever you wish for. And so Red keeps going back in there and going back in there. And finally, that's kind of one of the things that he's looking for. Now, the people that have lived in there, a lot of them died. Weird things happen, like graveyards that are along the perimeter or from inside there. Corpses just will reanimate for no reason, just out of the blue. Years later, they'll just kind of climb out of their graves and go home. The stalkers that go in there to look for these artifacts, there's obviously, I don't know if it's like if it's radioactive or whatever, but their children don't come out quite right either. When they have children, they're not, I don't know if you would consider it a birth defect, but different things happen to their children. And one of the stalkers, he goes in there and gets his legs somehow in this goo that's in there, and his legs turn into rubber, So just strange things. There's quite a bit of philosophy about 2/3 of the way through, about kind of our place in the universe. Are we really as intelligent as we think we are? And I don't know, I just really, really enjoyed this book. So I'm glad I had watched that other video that recommended it. And I also tend to really like Russian literature and Soviet literature. So that ticked a few boxes for me. This book did. So next, I went on to read some of my Thornwillow Press books. And one of them was this 20 Love Poems and a Song of Despair by Pablo Neruda. I did an unboxing of this on the channel when I first got it. And right after I did that unboxing, I just sat down and read the entire thing cover to cover. After the first poem, I was like, oh, this is really nice. And I just kept on reading it. And the poetry is just gorgeous, and some of it's really erotic and some of it's not so erotic. Some of it I'm not really sure I'm not that great at poetry, to be honest. Some of it just really escapes me as far as meaning, but I love it. And so I've read through this twice now, and I'm sure I'll read it a few more times in my lifetime and probably get more out of it each time. But if you have a chance to find, this, either a Thornwillow Press version of it or a more mainstream copy of it on Amazon, I'd suggest you pick it up if you like poetry. This was really good. Another one that I read, and I just read this one last weekend, was How to Tell a True War Story by Tim O'Brien. And I had decided that since it was Memorial Day, I wanted to read something that was war related, I guess in honor of, our vets, and more specifically, I guess, the men that have given their lives in protection of our country. And so this story was was extremely moving, I thought, and really did a good job of outlining that gap, that real gap that's between the military and the civilian. I've never served in the military. I live right next to a military base, though, right next to the Little Rock Air Force Base, actually. And so it's pretty much a military town. But I have no concept, and I think most of us civilians have no concept of what our troops endure when they go to fight for our country, the hardships and the impossible choices that they have to make when they're put in the line of fire. And the psychological effects of it and what it does to your mind, these choices and the things you have to endure when you're in this situation. And Tim O'Brien really does a good job of that, of telling, what it is they go through. And one of the things that struck me was, there's some vulgarity in here, and there's he's telling a story about one of his buddies who died, stepped on a mine, or I don't know what it was, some sort of artillery that he stepped on. I guess that's a mine. And his best friend writes a letter to the guy's sister, and the sister never writes back. And just kind of the tragedy of that also, that I don't know. It's just the things that our vets go through, and the men that have had to sacrifice their lives for this country. I find that very moving, and this helped me understand a little bit more. So I recommend this book too. I don't think I read a single bad book this month. They were all outstanding, really. And then comes my last two, and I really kind of read them together. I read What Artists Wear in conjunction with Orlando by Virginia Woolf. I started subscribing to a Patreon that's it's a online book club run by Benjamin McAvoy, who's a YouTuber, and the book club is the Hardcore Literature book club. And he goes through classics and gives lectures on his prescribed reading list for the year. And I joined it because they were going to do The Lord of the Rings this summer. And I was like, oh, I really want to do a deep dive in that and see what he has to say about it. Because I love his YouTube lectures on various classics. And I thought, gosh, I really would like to see his treatment of Lord of the Rings. And I thought that was going to start in May, but it didn't really start in May. I kind of started reading my Lord of the Rings book and realized, well, we're not really starting this yet. We're doing Orlando first. So then I set that aside and picked up Orlando. And this is such a cool book. It's not very long. This book is thicker than, it makes it look like it's a longer book than it is. But there's a lot of background material at the beginning. There's kind of a chronology of important events in her life at the beginning, as well as an introduction and a preface. And then at the end, there's a pretty long section of notes that's kind of a glossary and of who these people are, where these places are that are mentioned in the story. Orlando spans several centuries. It starts in Elizabethan times and goes up to the 1920s, and it follows the life of this nobleman slash noblewoman, Orlando. And the reason I say that is man slash woman, is Orlando starts out and lives the first 30 years of his life as a man, a male, and then wakes up one morning and realizes, wait a minute, I'm a woman, and lives the rest of their life as a woman. And so it's very interesting, the use of the play of gender, and also the fluidity of time. The fluidity of time and gender are some of the main elements of this book. He lives 30 years as a man, but that 30 years spans more than 30 years. So, because he's a man in the Elizabethan times, and then up to the Great Frost, which happened in 1708 and 1709, where everything just froze. Literally, the ground, the rivers, everything just froze overnight. But I like this book a lot because I'm fascinated with the fluctuations within time, with our experience of time. And I'm also fascinated with fashion and dress, and what our dress says about who we are, how it defines our gender, how it defines our personality, how it shapes how the world looks at us. And so I thought it was a perfect time also then to read What Artists Wear. That goes along great with this. This book is pretty much about 20th century and 21st century artists and how they chose what to put on their bodies, and their use of fashion as part of their art. Fashion, well, not fashion, but clothing really, as a utilitarian item that they used in creating their art, what they wore when they paint or when they sculpt, whatever. And let's see. Some of the artists in here are well known to me and well known to most of you, but some of them are not. The first one that is talked about is Louise Bourgeois, and she had a good relationship, a friendship with, I think it was Helmut Lang. Yes, the designer Helmut Lang, and so she had a lot of his clothes. There's also a section about Frida Kahlo, and here's a picture of Frida Kahlo in a man's suit, and she wore men's suits during a period of time when she was separated from the artist Diego Rivera, who was her lover. But then when she got back together with him, she went back to wearing, more traditional women's clothing, and kind of took on that women's role in her life again. Andy Warhol is in here, and he wore denim almost exclusively. They talk about he went to the White House to meet the president and various other dignitaries, heads of state, and he had to wear a tuxedo. But what nobody knew was that he had on jeans underneath his tuxedo because he thought the tuxedo was itchy. So, um, I don't know. I really loved this book too, and I thought it went well with the Orlando. Um, Orlando, she talks about when he becomes a she, talks about how there's no longer this freedom of movement with the body, with all these petticoats and all these, different things that a woman had to wear in the 18th and 19th century. Um, and there's one point early on when Orlando is a young man and he falls in love with um, a Russian princess, and he sees her and doesn't know if she's a man or a woman because she's wearing kind of these pantaloons. And it's kind of a man or a woman could be wearing that, and he doesn't realize that at first, and he thinks, "Oh God, gosh, I've fallen in love with someone of my own gender. What am I going to do?" And then he gets up closer to her and realizes that it is a woman, it's a princess, and so he pursues her. But anyway, I just really liked the way these went together. I thought it was a good choice to read them together. Sorry if this has been long-winded and kind of rambling, but anyway, those were the books I read. None of them were super long. All of them I enjoyed immensely. I have no bad book reviews this month. And I think I just have a lot of good books on my shelves right now. I'm not going to complain about that though. Well, anyway, I hope y'all will pick up one of these if you find them interesting, and hope you have a good morning, evening, afternoon, whatever time of day it is that you find yourself watching this, and I'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.